I always say to bands, like, you need an ego to the point that when you go on stage, you become this almost alter ego. You become this superhuman being, larger than life, that just entertains.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
You need that.
You need it.
Of course you do. You come off stage. Yeah, we're not living in the 1980s anymore. You can't be certain people in the way they were back then. It's a different time. You just be nice. That's the general take-home message of this when it comes to communicating with anyone. Hi and welcome to The Wire. This is Lightning in the Bottle's TV magazine show where we talk about a lot of topics that are close to our hearts that involves music. And today we're going to talk about communication, which is something crucial when you're in a band. Toby, if I say the word communication and music and band to you, that's 3 words, not 1, 3 words. What comes to mind?
Well, immediately I would say they're all inextricably linked.
That's why I said it. It's just pop 1, 2, 3. Oh yeah, I should have said 3. Absolutely, yeah.
No, they're all inextricably linked. I think you know that it's a big word with a wide sense of meaning. I think there really, but as a kind of general term, communication through music, communication with each other. Those things are absolutely crucial to creating an environment of success for your band. I've witnessed so many times in the productions I've done a massive lack of communication in bands. There are a couple that come to mind that were bands that I knew from the first moment I met them, and I'd never met them before. We were having that sort of, what I tend to do is part of my modus operandi when I work on a production job, is I'll have a very casual conversation with the band, usually in a rehearsal room, usually as part of the first time we ever get together and I hear the band play. But I always sit everyone down and we have a conversation, and I get the conversation going thus: okay guys, what's this all about? And I leave that question sort of hanging, and because I want the band to tell me what they are. This isn't about me. I'm a producer. My job is to try and bring the best of the band out. And 9 times out of 10, there's silence.
Blank.
It's blank faces. They don't know what to say. They look at each other. Someone's waiting to start to say something. Now, part of that is because it's we don't know each other, and it's trust, and we're trying to build the trust. But a massive part of it is that I genuinely don't think they've asked those questions to each other, and so I find myself in the situation where I'm then having to prompt the conversation into opening up some doors that have never been opened before, and sometimes it can be really difficult. Sometimes, if you're lucky, and if it goes the right way, it can be the best thing that's ever happened. But certainly, I found it's a major stumbling block in a lot of bands. The big one for me, really interesting. So many times I've found that members of the band don't know which other members of the band are listening to. They don't know what their favourite bands are. They don't know where their history of their music appreciation comes from. They've never sat down in a room and played their favourite records to each other, or they might have done it a little bit, but they've never had a conversation about how that then translates into what their band are going to do. How that stuff that you bring with you, because that's we're all influenced. We're all listen to our heroes, and we all part of our process of becoming a band is wanting to emulate our heroes. That is a given. We know that, but it's then trying to evolve that, isn't it, into a kind of collective involvement with each other to make music that then communicates your ideas. So that comes on to the next bit of the conversation, which is the communication of the music. How you relate yourselves between each other into creating music that then communicates that idea as a collective. That is really difficult to do. Really tough.
So would you say part of the problem, or not the problem, it's not a problem, part of the issue is we're living in a fast-paced technology era where we're consuming a lot of content on a daily basis. So if we go back in time and we're those teenagers and vinyl's out, you get the latest Metallica or Dio album, and you sit there and you look at it and you marvel over it, and you get together with your mates and you listen to it intently and you talk about it, and that's kind of got lost a little bit. It's all changed to
tap on the computer or your phone
and whatnot. And the other thing also as well, some of you guys might be married, had families and whatnot, and obviously got commitments with jobs, and
Yeah.
it's maybe not crossed your mind that sort of thing, getting together. Your first point about getting together and listening to each other's music, it hasn't struck you. That's maybe a really positive thing to do. So I'd highly recommend that. The music as well. Something I always remember, we were in the studio with Andy Sneap, and I had to. We were doing like some sort of demo pre-production work, and I had to like DI straight into the desk with Andy Sneap sitting there. So this is like 2005, 2006 or whatever. So he's just like done Kill Switch Engage, End of Heartache, Trivia.
And he's a great producer, and he's quick. He works quick, doesn't he, as well?
Won Grammys.
Yeah.
So I'm like a rabbit in the headlights. But it was such an experience because it was the first time that we really worked with a producer where he isolated everything. So I could hear exactly what I was playing. Then I realised quickly, I didn't know exactly what the drummer was playing. I didn't realise what the guitars were playing. I was in fact playing...
Isn't that a revelation?
You have to sort of take a step back and not beat yourself up too much about it. Because unless you're really into your music theory and unless you really want to know about that stuff, you do need to be told. And once you know and you practice, repetition, etc., you'll feel more confident. But understanding what each other are playing and not treating it as a, well, I'm the guitarist now, I know what I'm playing. It's like, is everyone else confident? Do you know what you're doing with the drums there? Is the bass doing the drums? Is guitars complementing each other? What are the vocals doing? The melodies, and then everything that flows after that. So, communication actually is a big thing. If we don't communicate...
Well, it's absolutely intrinsically at the centre, everything that you do as a musician, isn't it?
But and I can relate to this, but sometimes you just get in the room, you plug it in, if you're lucky enough to have all your gear set up, of course, back in the day would be bring all your gear in, set it up and whatnot, but we in the band I was in, we eventually got to a point where we had a lock up and everything was set up and we could just rock up, plug in and start playing. But I can totally look at it and go, actually, most of the time we didn't properly communicate.
No.
And then there's the other side, it's the business side.
Yeah.
Communication
through
in the business side.
Through the business side of things.
So, I mean, when I was a band in the pub, we obviously didn't have, in the pub days, we didn't have the internet or anything like that. I think it might have been coming through, but hard to get hold of. But certainly in terms of trying to communicate with industry people, it was extremely difficult. You didn't know how to reach these people. But now, everyone's on social media, you can find out an email address very quickly. And what I see happening time and time again is bands, and this is through no fault of their own because they don't know better, but they're shooting from the hip with their communications. They're sort of sending off an email going, hi, you need to check us out, and being quite rude sometimes. So communication, understanding what's outside of the bubble of the band is very important.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really, really, really true. I think because very, very naturally, when you're in a band and you've, especially if you've kind of reached a point where you've maybe got a bit of a local following, you start to get some reactions at the local press. You maybe got a spin on Planet Rock or whatever it is, or whatever, or the local radio. But you're starting to pull an audience. That's a very heady thing when you've never had that experience before. So you can start to really, essentially believe your own hype in a lot of ways. And I think what happens is you can't understand it when other people aren't interested. And you start to get that sort of, well, that you have to listen to us, because every single band in the world, and I've made 27 records as a producer now, and every band says the same things. They say, oh, well, you've got to see us live to really appreciate us. That's the classic. The other one is, they say things like, well, we're just unique. We're completely different from everybody else. And the reality is, none of us are really completely different from everyone else. And we're all good live if you're a good live band, if you're a good band. So, but I understand where that comes from. It's what that is. It's confidence building. It's building a sort of iron wall around yourselves to kind of insulate yourself from any sense of negativity. That's really important, actually. It is that is something that is needed, but it's by degrees. And once you start breaking out of that, once you start actually connecting with other people, if you are lucky enough to have, local radio DJ comes down to your gig, or happens to be part, or someone that's a tastemaker in your local environment comes down to your show, finds out that you're a cool band, likes what you're doing, and then comments in the local paper or on the radio station, whatever it's going to be, or on his blog or whatever. The last thing that you need to be doing is in a way, you've got to be very careful how you then communicate with that person. You've got to engage without pushing too hard. And it is really difficult to navigate this sort of stuff. So if you take that little example and broaden that out into the general music business, there is not a single record label, not that there are many anymore particularly, but there's not a single record label, publisher, management company, agent, promoter that's ever going to take kindly to an unsolicited email that just says, listen to my band, we're brilliant, we want to play your venue, or you've got to come and see us play. There's etiquette here, isn't there?
Yeah,
communication and how to communicate with people is utterly crucial. I mean, we'll touch upon this in further down the line in another magazine or some of these other programs, and certainly these are massive parts of our central teaching methods, isn't it? Of our workshops, etc.
Yeah, I mean, if we had to say one key word about when you're approaching people, just be nice.
I think that's really true.
Just be nice, and we'll talk about this more, like you say.
Yeah.
There's a blog that I wrote for Stampede. I called it Ego versus Alter Ego, which is I think worth discussing. But I always say to bands, like, you need an ego to the point that when you go on stage, you become this almost alter ego. You become this superhuman being, larger than life, that just entertains.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
You need that.
You need it.
But you come off stage. Yeah, we're not living in the 1980s anymore. You can't be certain people in the way they were back then. It's a different time. You just be nice. That's the general take-home message of this when it comes to communicating with anyone. And you'll be surprised. But let's talk more about this further down the line.
Absolutely.
Because I think there's some key tips that we can.
Okay, so because we taught a general broad stroke about communication, do you want to sum up what we think some of the key points are here about communication? On every level, what do you want?
Yeah, I think understand people, understand your band, understand your circumstances. Talk. When it comes to the music, don't just be there by yourself. You are a team, so understand every member. What are they doing?
Yeah.
Are you locking in together? Do you know what's going on? Because if you're just sitting there playing your guitar and thinking, I'm all right, Jack.
Yeah. Well, that isn't a band, is it? That's just that can be 4 or 5 individual musicians just playing for themselves. And we do know there are lots of bands like that. Even some very successful rock and roll bands behave like that. Yeah. But I'd like to add to that and just sort of say that every ounce of communication that you have with your band members on every single level feeds into the music, feeds into your creativity, gives credibility and kudos and I think really a sense of integrity and authenticity to the music. Yeah. So it's really, really important that you get to know each other on every level you possibly can. You know, we're not talking about inside leg measurements and who, etc., etc. But we are talking about emotional stuff. I mean, again, I think this is an elephant in the room. You know, quite often bands don't talk about the stuff that fucks them off and pisses them off and all the rest of it. And in
fact, you can actually feed off the frustrations if you talk about it.
It's inherently important. It's so important.
Some of the best music that's ever been made has been made by people that are loggerheads a little bit because they're not afraid to actually argue and draw out a point that comes to a conclusion that benefits the band.
Yeah, totally.
So don't be afraid to just talk about things that you might think upsets.
Absolutely.
Because if you're all really in it together and you understand each other, it shouldn't really be an elephant in the room.
Totally.
If any of this is making any sense to you and you want to get in deeper with your music and find ways to survive and thrive, and get in touch, we offer consultations, workshops, mentoring, co-writing opportunities, production opportunities, lots of stuff. Check out the website and get in touch.